in this room, and they said, no, we've got rules. And I said, where are they? And they pointed to the sign that said rights and responsibilities. And that's how they interpreted them, because a given history, you know, imagine trying to break in at year 10 level, or year 8. Now, if you break in at grade 2, in 3 years' time, you should be somewhere. But if you break in at year 8, I don't know if it's possible even to break in. But even when I did this for a year. I played with kids basically for a year. One half year was assertive, one half year was group process. At the end of that half year, one group said they didn't want to do this. The year 10s didn't want it. It was my job to control them. It was not their job to control them. They resented everything I did to make them responsible. The year 8 were okay with it because I had them interviewed independently. But the year 10 said, look, it's your job. They actually, the quote I took out was something, it's your job to control us and it's our job to learn. Science, meaning. So they weren't interested in doing it. Even they didn't want to understand it. And when they understood it, they didn't want it. And there's books called The Freedom of Slavery. You know, as long as a person's benevolent, it's okay. And most teachers are benevolent, so most kids will be quite comfortable with that. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting task to see if we actually can sell the idea that there are rights, first of all, and you have an obligation to protect those rights. Is anyone coming up against that? I think it's more in secondary than primary, but it's not such an easy sell, and it may take 4 years. Okay, what else have you got that came out of last session? Yeah? Yes, in fact, counterproductive. Teachers continue to use processes that are ineffective. As Glasser says, they spin their wheels, and yet they're rational people, so it's hard to understand, but they continue to do things that didn't work last time. In fact, they can often see that they made things worse, but they still do it again, and so does the system. And that's an interesting observation. It's hard to understand at times. Why should that be? Are we out of ideas? Are we locked into something where we're not rational anymore? I see it in a classroom as when the kids are controlling the teacher, and that means the teacher's probably not in a true adult state. I think that's when teachers, and at home too, because we do it with kids we love, you know, we teach these kids and we might love them, but we certainly love our own, but we do it with our own, you know. We have that one child who's difficult, and that child gets the same deal again and again and again, and we know it's not working, and it somehow just comes out of us. And so that spinning the wheels is a really interesting area of research that needs a lot of work. We've got to figure out how to break that cycle. One way is to do it in advance, which I think is easier, like we're going to do it the rest of the day. Look at a technique, simple techniques, and see if they will help. And you'll tell me in a week's time whether they did help, because you'll go and play a bit. Okay, what else? Yes?
I went through, you know, the list you gave us, the question of the child that got removed from the classroom.
Yeah, oh.
You did that question them.
Yes.
About what actually went through.
Yes.
It was interesting to see, I mean, a lot of this stuff, a lot of things happening, but it was interesting, it comes back to them not understanding what actually they had done specifically, all that kind of thing. So that question was really good. I have to go on for a bit more now, so I don't take my time. But it's something that I would use.
Yeah, I'm actually hoping I can get some of you to use it as an interview schedule or questionnaire, and then feed me back that information, and by the end of 4 weeks I will feed you back some data. I'll have it punched immediately and I'll feed you back. So you have a questionnaire in there for kids who are exited or isolated. If they're old enough to understand the questions, then let them read them. Just photocopy and give it to them. If they're not old enough, interview them and just circle what they say. But it would be really useful if I could get as you give them to me, I'll punch them in, and I'll make you a deal. Before the last session, I will have them analysed, because what I'm interested to see is not just how many take responsibility, but is there any connection between taking responsibility and what the teacher does? Because I think there is. The research says it. Yes?
Some people insisted to being responsible, that it's a teacher's job to control the class down to learn. Is that connected at all to knowing the boundaries and being given too much choice situation where you have to put too much effort into working out where these boundaries are. So I'd rather, in some situations, okay, you tell me what you want me to do, or you tell me what I can't do, and I'll just do that. It's kind of an easier road. And I think that's why in secondary colleges there's resistance to becoming responsible, because there's too much other things they need to do. I want to be doing this as well, sort of thing. There's a connection.
Well, there's some research. Is it the lack of clarity about boundaries? Is it, for example, that it's going to interfere with my relationships with others? Because that's certainly happened in my class. In one of my Year 10 classes, a kid said to another in a class meeting, look, when you screw up, that's fine because you're going to pass. But when you screw up and I join you, I'm going to fail. And on that day, so he said this in the context of some issues that occurred in class. On that day, their friendship ceased. The kid moved away from the other kid, which was good because he did pass because of it. But in the yard, they were no longer together either. So I mean, think of it, he came to school because of his relationships, not to learn science. He did not come to my class. He came because his friends were there. So now he's lost a friend. Is it worth it? I don't know. But he was willing, in the context of a discussion on what is responsible behaviour and the ripple effect of other people's behaviour, to make a comment like that, which was true, and he paid a huge price for it. So in that sense, there is a certain amount of risk, a genuine risk for these kids, if they speak up and try to be responsible. And imagine if they're going to be responsible for the behaviour of others. How's that going to work exactly? These are things we have yet to figure out, basically. I mean, I can show you primaries where it is working. I can't yet show you secondaries where it's working well. I can maybe find you one or two teachers, but that's about it. But, you know, in 4 years' time, I'll know if I can say different things. Not that I'll be saying anything, because I won't be working anymore, will I? Okay.
They may not be ready to take that step, but it doesn't mean they're not thinking about it. They might take the step in 1 or 2 or 4 or 10 years' time.
Yeah, maybe. You don't know when you plant something, when it sort of comes to fruition. And you don't know how many kids are in there thinking, I'd love the power, I'd love the right to say something. But in the kids we interviewed, they felt it was not their business to say anything. The teacher had not given them a mandate. They had no idea that this teacher would have been appreciative if they would have stepped in, because the teacher had all the power, the teacher made all the decisions, the teacher actually effectively created the rules, so it was the teacher's business, it wasn't their business. And they were frustrated for some teachers because the teachers weren't doing what they were supposed to do, and they didn't know how to deal with that. So this is another problem they have to deal with, because if you concentrate all that power but you can't exercise it, then the place can be quite chaotic. So these are things that we'll know more about in 4 years. But the logic's clear. There are no rules. There's just responsible behaviour or not yet responsible behaviour. There's responsible as in doing the right thing. There's responsible as in getting others to do the right thing and helping them. Now, when we get to D's and you see the major factor that creates the wrong things is in fact difficulties with work, perceived threat in what we're being asked to do, there are many things kids can do which are not behaviour management to reduce behavioural problems in classes, just by helping. So it doesn't have to be a behaviour management response. It can go to, someone said, to the problem behind that. Just make the kid feel better about himself, and he probably won't do that as much. So, you know, if that may be something you can do. Now, it's still acceptable to do that in primaries. It is not acceptable to think about it in secondaries. But in some secondaries it is, in alternative settings it is. There it's not so uncommon that these ideas are well understood. With the most difficult kids, it's really quite paradoxical. With the most difficult kids, they're able to do these things, and the kids will assist each other. Okay, what else came out? Yeah.
Wouldn't structural situations like impact on what you just talked about? In the primary setting where the teacher has a group of students with lunch in the day,
yep,
and pretty much the same environment, so it's much easier to have a consistent set of rights and responsibilities. But in a secondary setting where the kids can be moving into the science area,
yeah,
which has developed its own set of rights and responsibilities,